We are in a sermon series called Dare to Live the Life of Faith. It's an adventure. It's a risk. We talked about taking risks. We talked about taking the initiative. And this may sound like a repetition of what I've said in the past, but living a life of faith is stepping forward. It's one thing to say, I'm going to take the initiative. It's another thing to take that step and do it. And so, look at a man by the name of Caleb, who has a lot in common with Jonathan. And I hope you'll see some of the distinctions that make them similar. But how many of you, growing up, do you remember the first time that you stood at the top of the high dive diving board? The first time. You've seen people jump off, and then you always see, there's always that first time you climb up that. It doesn't look so high until you get up there, and then you have to look down. And by the time you get to the edge, there's no going down because there's a line already waiting and yelling at you to go, come on, go, do it, do it. I had a video I wanted to show you about taking the risk and taking that first step in a movie called The Sandlot. But because of some of the language in that scene, it had been a nightmare to try to edit. So I have another scene from the same movie that's cleaner, and it's about a young boy. If you remember the story of Sandlot, there's a group of kids, 9 of them, playing baseball all summer long. And Benny Rodriguez, he was the star of the show. He was the guy who was Mr. Baseball himself growing up. And they lost a baseball. It wasn't just any baseball. It was a baseball with Babe Ruth's signature on it. And it went over the fence where a beast, a man-eating beast, a big dog, had collected all of these balls. The end of the story, they find out the dog is just fine. He's not a beast. He didn't eat people. And the man who lived in there was blind, so he didn't get out. So all these rumors came about. But this ball was so important to one of the little boys, and they couldn't get it back. So Benny was going to step up, and he was trying to debate what to do about it. When he's dreaming at night one night, and this is what happened. That's why I'm afraid to open the closet door. But we've all had that high dive moment where we have to make a decision what we're going to do. Are we going to just be a hero, or are we going to be a legend? And so we talk about, every one of us probably have that moment where, whether it's a high dive or something else, we come to the edge, and now we have to we've taken the initiative to get up to there. We've taken the initiative to climb that ladder, to do whatever it is. Now are we going to take that step forward? Are we going to do it? Life is high dive, somebody said. This is the area where we either go forward or we go backward. This is usually the dividing line, the line that separates those who see the great adventure of faith or those who seize on that adventure. And as I said, Jonathan and Caleb have some things in common. They both had to take a hill. Jonathan stepped out and took a risk. He left the safety of the pomegranate tree. He left the army behind him. And he showed himself to the enemy, and he went up there and engaged the enemy. And Jonathan is now standing on the edge of that high dive, ready to take that step. Caleb is also a man who stood at the end of the high dive, who's trying to decide what to do, but there was no hesitation in Caleb. Caleb was one of 2 men if you remember, that Moses sent out to spy the promised land. Joshua and Caleb, they came back and brought a good report. It's just as God says. But the other 10 men said, oh yeah, it's good, but there are giants and big cities and huge walls and mighty armies. Hey, we can't do this. And Caleb and Joshua says, yes, we can, because God is on our side. And they said, no, they took a vote. They didn't ask God, they took a vote. One of the things we as church members need to understand is when we take a vote, we need to seek God's will. We need to seek God's will. And we need to be unified in our decision to move forward. And we come to Caleb. He was one that gave a good report. And because of his faith and obedience, he was given a promise by God. So we want to pick this up at Joshua chapter 4. And I know I had verse 6 in your outline, but I think it's chapter 3. Verse 3 we're going to look at. Chapter 14, verse 3. Give us some background here. Moses had already given a grant of land to the 2.5 tribes of the east side of the Jordan River. But he had given the Levites no such allotment. The descendants of Joseph had become two separate tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim. And the Levites were given no land at all, only towns to live in with surrounding pasture land for their livestock and their possessions. So the land was distributed in strict accordance to the Lord's command to Moses. And a delegation from the tribe of Judah, led by Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and the Kenizzites, came to Joshua at Gilgal. And Caleb said to Joshua, listen to the words of Caleb here. Remember what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, about you and me when we were at Kadesh Barnea. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land of Canaan. I returned and gave an honest report, but the brothers who went with me frightened the people from entering the promised land. For my part, I wholeheartedly followed the Lord my God. So that day Moses solemnly promised me, the land of Canaan on which you were just walking will be your grant of land, and that your descendants forever, because you wholeheartedly followed the Lord. Now, as you can see, the Lord has kept me alive and well, as He has promised, for all these 45 years, and since Moses made this promise, even while Israel wandered in the wilderness. Today, I am 85 years old. I'm as strong now as I was then when Moses sent me on that journey. I can still travel and fight as well as I could then. So give me the hill country that the Lord promised me. You will remember that as scouts we found the descendants of Anak living there in great walled towns. But if the Lord is with me, I will drive them out of the land, just as the Lord said. So Joshua blessed Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and gave Hebron to as his portion of land. The older I get, the harder it is for me to say I'm just as good now as I was then. It's like the old Toby Keith country western song. I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was. You know, Caleb is saying here, I'm 85 years old, but I can fight and I can travel and I will take that hill. And the hill country of Judah is just that, a hill country. Normally, when you're sitting on top of the hill, you have an advantage over the enemy coming at you. But Caleb says, but the Lord is with me. I'll take that hill. I'll take that land. And I'll claim the promise God has given me. Caleb was about to take a step off the high dive into the greatest adventure of his life. For 45 years, he'd been running around in the desert. Are you tired of running around in the desert? Are we ready to take some hills? It is time for us to step forward. It's time for the Christian church actually to step forward. And when we do, we're not going to be popular. We're going to get more negative hits on our website or on our YouTube page. But I'm okay with that as long as we're doing what God has called us to do. But the safe thing is stay here in the desert. The safe thing to do is not to step forward. Maybe the safe thing to do is climb down off of that high dive. But if you do, you'll never experience the thrill of that high dive. The thrill of that adventure. Well, I don't like high dives. It's an allegory, okay? A metaphor. Follow me, please. Take that step. Because we are called to move forward. A call to advance is a call to danger. A call to advance is a call to danger. There are some parallels, as I said, between Jonathan and Caleb. Both moved with a promise from God. God had promised Caleb victory in the land as his inheritance. And God had promised Jonathan that Israel would have victory over the Philistines. They had a promise and they moved on it. God has given us a promise to move forward and take a step. Both moved towards the promise of God. Both received the promise from God. A call to events may appear counterintuitive sometimes. But folks, it's not counter-faith. It's not counter-faith. It may seem counterintuitive, particularly to the world. And if you look out there, you tell me, are things upside down or not? Yes. Listen, I had a couple of years of biology in high school. I took biology 1 and biology 2. I dissected things. I took chemistry. I blew things up. You know, I took physics and we threw things. There's certain things I kind of know. There's certain things that my two-year-old granddaughter knows. She knows that her brother's a boy and her sister's a girl at 2. She knows this. How come that's so difficult for the world to understand? And when we engage in the marketplace of ideas with God's truth, you got to understand there's some danger out there. And it may seem counterintuitive, but when you move with God, you must move and advance mentally with Him as well. You move forward unless God tells you to stop. There are certain things you and I do not need permission to do. There are certain things in Scripture we don't need God's permission to do. He's already commissioned us to do them. There are certain things that you and I do not need a calling to do because we have already been called to do it. How sad is it for God to tell a church somewhere to advance, to take a risk, take the initiative, and step forward boldly and advance forward, only to say, you know, we probably ought to pray about this. Wait a minute, you know, we probably ought to seek God's will in this. There are certain things that we are commissioned to do. There are certain things that God has called us to do. And you know what? We don't need to pray about it. He's already given us that call. He's already told us what to do. We just need to do it. But folks, listen. When we do, there could be some danger here. How many of us are more concerned about the negatives that we overlook all the positive stuff that's been given to us on YouTube? 2, a call to advance is the sign to step forward. Listen to me. A call to advance is the sign. Big bold letters. The sign to move forward. For Jonathan and Caleb, all they needed was a sign. As a sign was a call to move it, to advance. See, Caleb for 45 years had this promise. And I don't know about Jonathan too much and how long he dwelt on it, but something got to him underneath that pomegranate tree and says, God has told us to move forward. How come we're not doing it? Well, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. He took the biggest risk there was. Remember a little shepherd boy named David who took some sandwiches and food to his brothers out of the battle line, and this big giant was coming out taunting everybody? Was it that David had more faith, or did he just young enough not to care? See, maybe as we get older, we start to say, you know, it hurts when you do things. Anybody go to bed last night and wake up with aches and pains and wonder what's going on? Right? Caleb is 85 years old, folks. Both of them were looking for a word to move forward. The word was, come up to us. That was Jonathan's thing. The challenge to advance was the affirmation of God's power and blessing. Is the primary word from God to us stop, or is it to go? What's the primary word God tells us? Let's take a look at, I don't have this written down. This is dangerous, so stay with me. You want to take an adventure? Hang in there. Listen to me. Jesus says, come and listen. Come and see. He says, come and die. All of those things, come. At the very end, you know what he says? Go. The last word he says to us is, go. Now, first of all, do you hear the word stop in any of those things? No! Too many opportunities are lost because we're waiting for a word that has already been given. For most of us, wait is the kiss of death. Waiting to make more sense takes a whole lot less effort. Oh, this doesn't make sense. We need to make sure. Some of you who are thinkers, good for you. Most men tend to be thinkers, and women tend to be more emotional. I sometimes just go with my gut. And I'm right. But when I'm wrong, I'm so wrong. So I have to have thinkers around me to say, hey, maybe you need to think this through. But at some point, we just have to stop. Do something. While advancing implies an increase of effort, an increase of danger. I think sometimes churches become 85 years old. And they say, we're 85. Well, you know, we can't do what we used to do. It takes effort. I don't think it's danger. I think it's effort. And it's so easy to wait and analyze than it is to go and do and risk. A call to advance is the sign to move forward. So what kind of sign are you looking for? If you're looking for a sign, what kind of sign are you looking for? As Jonathan moved towards the promise of God, there was the call to advance that was confirmed when he started what? Stepping forward and jumping off the high dive. You think he would have known that if he hadn't taken that first step? Confirmation comes in the midst of the action. By the way, most of you are probably thinking, and you've turned to Judges and said, well, what about Gideon? Listen, we don't have to emulate Gideon. Gideon was Gideon, and God was patient with Gideon. But Gideon was special. We don't need to emulate what he does. God calls Gideon. God tells Gideon that he is a mighty warrior. And listen to what Gideon says. God tells him, oh, if I could only hear God's voice speak to me audibly, that would be different. No, it wouldn't be. Because look at what Caleb did. Caleb heard God audibly say to him, I want to use you. You're a mighty warrior. And here's what Gideon's response was. Sir, if the Lord is with us, why has all of this happened? And where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites. God tells Gideon to go in strength, to go with God's strength, not his own strength. And what does Gideon do? He heard him. He responded to him. He goes, we're just like him. Okay, well, I'll put out some fleece. I sometimes wonder, what would have happened if Gideon just stepped out? What miraculous thing would have happened in Gideon's life that was beyond his conceived imagination? Because he had been entrenched. In fact, he's trying to separate the wheat from the chaff in an area that makes it almost impossible to do. It was almost insanity to try to do what he was trying to do. He'd lost some hope. He's lost some faith. And then God shows up and talks to him. Okay, if you really are God, then why don't you do this? But we need to do this in the church. Well, God, if you want us to do it, we're going to do this for us then. Instead of just moving out and just doing it. We come to this intersection just like Gideon does. God begins with go, and you know what? We respond by wait. He says go, we go, wait. He says go, and we say wait. You understand what I'm saying here? You understand what's happening? Oh, I can't do that. I may be the only one that can do this. And I don't want to do it by myself. But I said, go. Yeah, God, let's just wait, see if there's other people, and then I'll follow them. He said, well, why don't you follow me? You see where this is going? Anybody been there? Or am I just talking to myself? Because I'm not hearing a whole lot of amens. Is it possible that we have been fleecing our opportunities rather than seizing them? That we've said to God, I'm not doing anything risky, not a thing, or going anywhere until you give me a sign. Is that our justification for living a low-risk life in absence of a sign to live differently? A call to advance is a call to danger. A call to advance is the sign to step forward. A call to advance requires a response. Requires a response. We can respond by saying yes. The only sign we need is that God needs it done. God needs it done. What does God need done around here? And I'm not talking about the building. Or plumbing, or heating, or cooling. We need all of those. But what does God need done? We live in a community where 80 to 85% of the people are unchurched. Meaning that they don't even go to church once a month. We live in a society today that is biblically illiterate. The family Bible no longer sits on the coffee table in the house because there's no coffee table anymore. Instead, there's a 65-inch flat panel TV instead. What does God need done? You see it? There's a call. We see it. Shouldn't we be moving forward? What is it about our conversation with God that we seem to hear the no more readily than the yes? Somebody wrote, if we heard the first words of Jesus in the great if we heard the first word of Jesus in his great commission, go, as all the permission we need to do the will of God? What if we would interpret the word go and the commission, therefore go, and we interpret that to be the will of God? How would our lives be different if we worked from a giant yes than a giant no? Whew. We just need to change the way we think. Got to change the way we think. I wrote this down because I didn't want to mess it up. Have you ever been stuck behind someone in traffic? Anybody? Anybody live in Tucson? Last couple of days, I was in a location. I won't tell you where the location is. I was in a location where the traffic was just backed up. It was, there's some places in Tucson that you don't want to go at certain times of the day, if you can avoid them. Maybe on that day you were in a particular hurry. We always are. Maybe you were running late to an important engagement. Important in the sense of whatever is important to you, I guess. There's just one car in front of you at the light. You're watching the light with intense focus, right? Waiting for it to change from red to green. Anybody here done that? Just waiting. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. It seems to take forever, but it finally comes to pass. You take your foot off the brake, you're just about to hit the gas pedal when you realize that the person in front of you is entirely unaware that he or she has permission to go. Instead of looking forward, he or she is fixed on their own image in the rearview mirror, or texting on their phone, or reaching down to the floorboard for whatever fell off the seat. Do you remember what you were thinking at that moment? Move! Right? It doesn't get any greener than this, folks. Move! I wonder what God's thinking. Oh, you didn't see that coming, did you? God's behind us. Light's green. Come on. What are you waiting for? You know and I know where we're going. I don't know. Let's see here. Oh, I got to take a selfie. A call to events requires us to respond. We can respond by leaning forward, by the way. We lean on God. In fact, one of our hymns is Leaning on the Everlasting Arms. It's a great hymn. But leaning on the arms of God may place us in an alarming situation. We must not lean backwards on God. Instead, we need to lean forward on God. You know, remember the trust falls? I hope they catch me. Right? We need to lean forward. You know, the trust falls forward are a whole lot more easier to take than the ones leaning back. But God is standing in front of us. He's showing us the way. Are we leaning towards Him, or are we back away from Him? Leaning forward is an important position. By the way, how many of you snow ski? Snow ski? How difficult is it to ski when you're leaning backwards? I live in the desert. I watch people all the time. I get on a sled. That's the best thing I can do. Get on a sled. You're sitting there in the sled, and there's a hill. You want to go down it, but if you're going like this, are you ever going to go down that hill? You got to. Then once you go down, now you're wondering, what did I think? Boy, here I go. What a thrill! What a thrill! We can't lean back on God. We need to learn to lean in the direction that we're supposed to. God's instructions to go, live life, take risks, move forward, and advance. That's what He tells us to do. We can respond by being ready. We can respond by being ready. God is telling His church to go. If a church is filled with members, it gets an occasional missionary. If a church is filled with missionaries, it gets that is just about, it's all just about geography. The church who is on mission, however, will have people who are already on mission, so that when God calls and He comes to us and He calls us, it's just a matter of changing our address. That's all. We can respond by defying our fears. We can respond by saying yes. We can respond by leading forward. We can respond by being ready. And we can respond by defying our fears. Our phobias of faith paralyzes us from experiencing a great adventure that God wants us to have. What would our world look like if we were a society of Calebs instead of a society of Gideons? Think about it. What if we were the Calebs of the world? All of us. Our church. It's just one church. It's just one church on the far east side of Tucson. And people see this big pink church. And by the way, I know people want to change the color. But when I tell people I'm in that big pink church, there on Igo and Speedway, oh yeah, I know that pink church. That's a pink church. It's the only pink building around. I'm hesitant to change the color because everybody knows where we're at because of the pink building. Wouldn't it be better if they knew where we're at because of the people that resides within the building? Oh yeah, I know those people. Where are you located at? Because they're over there and they're over there and they're over there and they're over there. Well, we meet together at 9100 East Speedway. Okay. Do you see the difference? One last thing, and I know I'm out of time, but stay with me. A call to advance is a divine invitation. It's a divine invitation. Because see, God is throwing us a party. And I want to read a passage of Scripture here that you're very familiar with. Luke 14. You don't have to turn there. I'll just read it to you. But Luke 14, beginning around verse 15. Hearing this, a man sitting at the table with Jesus exclaimed, "What a blessing it would be to attend a banquet in the kingdom of God." Jesus replied with this story. Stop and think about it. How many of us sit at church sometimes singing, maybe you got semi-good preaching from your pastor, you know, and you're feeling pretty good. What would it be like if we sat at the banquet hall, the banquet table in heaven with God and Jesus there? What a pretty sight. And Jesus replies, don't go woo yet. Jesus replies with this story. A man prepared a great feast, sent out many invitations. When the banquet was ready, he sent his servants to tell the guests, "Come, the banquet is now ready." But they all began making excuses. One said, "I have just bought a field that I must inspect, and I must inspect it. Please excuse me." Another says, "I just bought 5 pairs of oxen, and I want to try to get them out. Please excuse me." Another said, "I just got married, so I can't come." Okay. The servant returned and told his master what they had said. Engraved invitations went out. Folks, I'm too busy. I can't come. I'm too busy because it's life. There's too many things. There's an NFL football game going on right now. I can't come. The servant returned and told his master what they'd said. The master was furious and said, "Go quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and invite the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame." After the servants had done this, he reported, "There's still room for more." So his master says, "Go out into the country lanes and behind the hedges and urge everyone you find to come, so that the house will be full. For none of those I am first invited will get even the smallest taste of my banquet." If I just had an engraved invitation from God, folks, listen, you have an engraved invitation right now. Don't be one of those people today, right now, not to accept that invitation. The participants of this party are those who hear God's invitation and seize on the opportunity. The poor, the weak, the blind, those on the highways and the byways, hiding under the hedges, those who are unworthy, come to the banquet table. They are the lost. There's lost opportunities of rejecting God's invitation. There are the lost opportunities when we ignore God's invitation to join Him in what He's already doing and where He's doing it. One of the things I really like about Blackaby's writing, he says one of the things we ought to be doing is God is already at work doing something, and we have an invitation to join Him in that work. We don't have to start it. He has already started it. We just need to join Him in it. And you know what? A work that God has started is going to succeed. Those who missed the party were full of excuses. The parable share some excuse. The parable shares some. Two just chose not to come. Well, one said, "Well, you know, because I got married, he wasn't allowed to come." Listen. Use our wives for excuses to do godly things when we shouldn't. We should move where God leads us to move. Meaning that, you know, fortunately for me, I have a wife that helps me stay centered in God's will. You know? And wives, the best thing you can do for your husband is stay centered in God's will, so he stays centered in God's will. One guy gets married, two guys says, "I just can't come. I'm busy." One guy says, "I can't come. I got married. My wife told me I can't come." We can't use that excuse. We can't use that excuse. Often the ones who are supposed to encourage us to move forward sometimes are the ones that hold us back. And I'm not just talking about wives. Let's take a look at the negatives, comments on some of our YouTube page. Well, we can't do that. We offended somebody. If you're watching right now, I'm going to offend you. Okay? If you're watching right now, I'm going to offend you. Jesus came to die for your sins because you're a sinner and you need Jesus in your life right now. For many people, that's offensive. I don't mean to offend you. I don't mean to offend anybody here. But what I do want you to hear is the truth. That there is not one good enough to get into God's heaven without Jesus. The Bible says there's no other name in whom to call to find salvation in. You understand? Well, you talk about Jesus way too much. No, we don't talk about Jesus enough. If you came here, and if you're watching on YouTube, you need to understand this. We don't want you to leave here without Jesus. And if that offends you, okay. But it's the truth. For no one comes to the Father but by His Son, Jesus. Simple. Very simple. So simple that a 6-year-old boy that I know did that. A 5-year-old girl, my wife, my daughter, 9-year-old boy, whoops, sorry about that. I forgot where the microphone was. Did it. Some of you have some of the same. I know people, I know an 82-year-old man that came and said, you know, I guess I'm not too bad for Jesus to take care of me. And he got saved, and we got him in the baptistry waters. I don't care if you're 8 or 80. Stop making excuses. God says to come and go. So my question to you this morning is, what's your excuse? What excuse are you making for not coming and going? We need to come to Jesus in our lives. I don't know what that means. Well, you know what? In just a moment, we're going to sing a song. Somebody's going to be up front. And if we have to sing this song 14 times to get it across, that's what we're going to do. But hear me. If you're here and you're watching, don't leave without Jesus. Don't make an excuse like you're too busy. Oh, I know it all. Or, you know, I'm so bad I don't think God wants me. It's because you're so bad that God wants you. You understand? What's your excuse? Oh, wait a minute. You don't have one. You come this morning. Would you pray with me? Father, thank you for the greatest adventure that I've ever been on. When I asked you, Father, to come into my life and save me from my sins, and I asked Jesus to take up residency in your Holy Spirit to envelop me, I didn't realize, Father, at 9, the adventures that you were going to take me on. And I truly have an abundant life because of what you've done in my life. And Father, I would like others to experience this same adventure, this same dynamic, Father, like jumping off the high dive. Father, it's interesting. When we hit that water, we come right back up and we get back and we want to do it again. Father, for a church, we just do not want to stay stagnant. As a body of believers here, Father, meeting in this place, Father, we don't want just to exist. Help us to step forward like Caleb, like Jonathan, like others who have stepped forward to experience this, to seize on the moment and dare to live this adventurous life of faith, Father. Help us to do that. But let us do it because you've told us to go. And we're being obedient to that call. And for those who don't know you, Father, I pray that they will not leave here without Jesus. Whether they make a decision, maybe they just need to ask some questions. But Father, we don't want anybody, either on YouTube or in this building, to leave us without Jesus in their life. And for some of us who've made decisions for you, Father, it's time for us to take that plunge, that step into obedience with baptism. To solidify that testimony within us, Father. That standing stone, so to speak. That tent peg that we stuck down in the ground that we can come back to time and time again when doubts enter in. And then for some of us, Father, We've come to you. We've been baptized. We've partaken in the Lord's Supper. We fellowship in a group of other believers. And maybe, Father, it is time for us to break free from the bondage of monotony and mediocrity into a new adventurous life of faith that has risk and danger involved, that we can truly live. And Father, help us to get over those excuses and take a stand for you. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. In our church, we give you a chance to respond to God's Word. Some of you can just make an altar right where you're at. That's all you need to do is make an altar right where you're at. Or maybe the physical act, you're just coming to the front and kneeling and praying. That's representative of your heart kneeling before God. Maybe you have questions about church membership or about baptism, or maybe you have questions about Jesus. Coy Brewer is back, and he's going to be up here to receive you as we sing. But I found the best way to move forward is to stand. Stand. If you can stand, stand. Because it's hard to take a step forward when you're sitting. So you come as we sing.